There are evenings that never seem to end. Beneath the golden haze, forever suspended over the Giza Plateau, the sun does not quite set. It only drifts sideways, casting the shadows of stone blocks into long, quiet slabs, layered, unmoving, exhaling like old memories. The pyramids of Giza, three silent peaks, have stood here without explanation. Sand shifts, people pass, dynasties rise and fall. But these pyramids remain, needing no reason, offering no name. No one truly knows when it began. They are called wonders, marvels, masterpieces. But sometimes, at the edge of a night that has no season, if one pauses long enough and gazes directly at the highest peak, something else might be heard. Not wind, not footsteps. A whisper, rising from the place where sand has never left stone. More than a century ago, the first archaeologists touched those ancient stones, hoping to uncover tombs, treasure, sacred inscriptions. But what they found was silence. No carvings, no markings, no sacred names. Just empty chambers, corridors leading nowhere. Not a tomb, not a shrine, only a structure too precise to explain. As if someone once knew something the world has long since forgotten. Modern engineers measuring the Great Pyramid noticed something strange. The sides are not flat. From base to peak, each face is split by a subtle inward fold. 8 faces, not 4. A deviation almost impossible to detect with the naked eye. Yet it has endured through centuries of war and weather. Why would anyone carve such detail, invisible from below, unless it served a purpose unseen? Some say such construction is impossible without technology far beyond what ancient man possessed. But perhaps technology is not required. Perhaps only memory. A memory not born of this humanity. Elsewhere in the world, an old map was found, its etched lines aligning precisely with Giza's location. No author, no label. Only a faint inscription along the bottom edge, not where it is, where it waits. Not where it stands, but where it waits. Waits for what? Or for whom? Maybe Giza is not the center of Egypt, as we've been told. Perhaps it is the intersection of 2 timelines, 2 recollections, 2 civilizations, one of which has been buried not by sand, but by forgetting. And from these voiceless stones, the questions drift like grains of dust in the heated air. If the ancient Egyptians lacked the tools to build them, who did? If the sands have lain undisturbed for thousands of years, what lies beneath still untouched? And if what we believe to be true is only the visible edge of another story left untold? Tonight, let's wander where no maps can guide us. Welcome to Forgotten History. It began with a mistake, a small, forgettable oversight, or perhaps the kind of truth that waits for the sky to speak it aloud. In the 1940s, a Royal Air Force pilot flew low over the desert at sunset. The light was soft, slanting, the kind of golden glow that softens even the harshest outlines. He glanced down at the Great Pyramid, expecting sharp corners and symmetry, four clean faces that converged to a single point. But what he saw did not belong to the textbooks. The shadow across the pyramid's side was uneven, split. The face appeared folded, as if gently pinched along its middle. And then he saw it again, and again, on all four sides. A silent doubling, a crease, too subtle for earthbound eyes. 8 faces, not 4. No one had ever mentioned it. No builder, no scribe, no explorer in thousands of years had recorded such a detail. The pyramid had been drawn, mapped, worshipped, photographed, but never truly seen. Not like this. The fold is only visible from above, only when the sun hangs low on the horizon during the spring and autumn equinoxes. Only then do the shadows align just right. Only then does the structure speak its hidden truth. Not 4 sides, 8. And yet the precision of it is impossible to dismiss. Each crease runs perfectly straight, slicing from base to summit with less than a single degree of deviation. The engineering required is beyond even modern effort. Even today, no one has successfully replicated this technique. Not at that scale, not without seams, not with such enduring accuracy. The pyramid was not carved. It was placed, block by block, line by line, and every block agrees with the fold. There is no error. There is no room for chance. But why? Why shape a monument in a way that no human from the ground could perceive? Why build in such secret geometry unless the builders stood elsewhere, looked from above, or never meant it for human eyes at all? For years, researchers dismissed the discovery. A trick of the light, shadow misunderstood. But as laser mapping and satellite imagery became more refined, the crease revealed itself again and again. The Great Pyramid of Giza was never 4-sided. It had always been 8. The deeper mystery lies not only in its geometry, but in its silence. Other pyramids across Egypt display inscriptions, cartouches, scenes of kings and gods, painted or etched deep into the walls. But the Great Pyramid holds no such stories, no funerary texts, no images, no name. Not even in the king's chamber. Just stone. Endless stone. A voice that chooses not to speak, or perhaps one that was never meant to be heard by us. And so the 8-sided pyramid sits at the center of the old world, whispering questions not in words, but in weight, shadow, and alignment. If the purpose of its fold is not aesthetic, not religious, not structural, then what is left? Some have speculated it once served as a giant sundial, casting complex shadows to mark equinoxes and solstices. Others claim it encodes mathematics, harmonics, or even gravitational resonance. But no theory fits completely. Every answer leaves a corner untouched. And always, that question returns. If this was built for something greater, who were the builders? Ancient legends from across the world speak of the ones before, a race not named, not remembered, but always hinted. In Sumer, in India, in the Andes, in fragments from the Dogon people of Mali, in the oral histories of the Australian Dreamtime, they describe tall beings, luminous and strange, who taught knowledge but left no trace. Could these stories be remnants of the same shadow? The ones who folded a pyramid into 8? Or perhaps it was not a race at all. Perhaps it was a single mind, a consciousness greater than form, a design without hands, without tools, only thought, only memory. Still, the pyramid endures. The 8 faces remain. They gather the wind, slice the stars, hold the silence. And under that silence, something continues to breathe, like a rhythm, too old for time, a memory folded into stone. They weigh more than any breath could carry, more than 1,000 men could lift. The blocks of stone that make up the Great Pyramid are not decorative. They are not hollow. They are not light. Each one is solid, ancient, and impossibly heavy. Most weigh between 2 to 4 tons. Some, silent, buried deep near the base, weigh up to 15. And a few, hidden in the heart of the king's chamber and the upper relieving vaults, tip towards 70. Yet one was found near the base of another structure just a few hundred meters away that reaches 250 tons, and all of them were moved. All of them were placed. Not one lies where nature left it. The desert is vast, a sea of sand with no water and no current. There are no trees to make wheels, no rivers that lead directly to the Giza Plateau, no machines, at least none that history admits. The nearest quarries are miles away. The hardest granite comes from Aswan, nearly 500 miles to the south. And yet, here they are, fitted together with such precision that not even a blade can slip between them. No mortar, no sealant, just stone leaning against stone, locked forever by weight, angle, and something else no one has quite named. The methods proposed over the years are many. Ramps made of mud, log rollers dragged by slaves, pulleys powered by countless men, but none account for the smoothness of the finish or the absence of tool marks. None explain how upward angles were maintained over hundreds of feet. None can replicate the build, not in full scale, not with the same materials, and not with the same perfection. Attempts have been made. Stones were dragged, pyramids were mimicked, but something always fails. The scale, the time, the precision, the understanding, what is known, what is not denied, is the math. The angles of the Great Pyramid match the curvature of the earth. Its height to perimeter ratio echoes the proportions of a sphere. Its dimensions encode pi. The golden ratio, the speed of light, if one measures in meters. But the ancient Egyptians had no decimal system, no metric units, no global positioning, and yet these stones speak numbers as fluently as they defy gravity. Some claim coincidence, that patterns emerge when one looks long enough, but coincidence does not move a 250-ton stone into place. Coincidence does not balance weight on nothing. Coincidence does not align every edge to the cardinal points within a fraction of a degree. North, south, east, west, as if the very earth were its compass. And then there are the marks, faint, rare, etched into a few stones far above ground level, in corridors few have entered. They are not hieroglyphs. They are not ornamental. They look like measurements, symbols that resemble lines, arcs, unknown units. Some believe they are remnants of a lost architect's plan. Others say they were left not by the builders, but by those who later tried to understand them. The copyists, the inheritors, because the pyramid, as it stands, bears the signature of no pharaoh, no royal seal, no dedication. Even the sarcophagus in the king's chamber is empty, unmarked, its lid long vanished as though it were never closed. And so the question deepens, not just how these stones were moved, but why? Why build something so exact, so permanent, yet leave it nameless? Why fill it with numbers, but not with meaning? Why leave chambers sealed, pathways unfinished, doors that open to nowhere? Some suggest the pyramid was not a tomb, but a machine, not for the dead, but for the stars, that it once captured energy, sound, or resonance, that the stones vibrated, that the structure spoke in a frequency we no longer hear. These are speculations, of course, theories with no evidence, but neither does the conventional explanation satisfy. It asks us to believe that millions of stones were moved, cut, polished, and placed by hand within 20 years without leaving behind a single image of the process. And the more one stands near the pyramid, the more it presses inward. Not in hostility, not in menace, but in memory. The weight is not only physical, it is historical, psychic, like a thought left unfinished, echoing through stone. At night, the air cools and the wind dies. The stones radiate heat absorbed from a day beneath the unrelenting sun. If you sit near the base, in silence, the ground beneath you feels not empty, but full, as though something old still hums just beneath the surface. A pulse, not mechanical, not magical, just waiting. And in that waiting, something watches, not with eyes, not with intention, but with presence, as though the stones remember being moved by hands no longer found in history. Long before the sky was mapped, it was watched. Before compasses, before sextants, before glass bent into telescopes, people looked upward and whispered names into the dark. Orion, Sirius, Thuban. But the stars did not need our names. They knew their own. And perhaps they once knew the shape of the earth better than we did. Above the Giza Plateau, 3 stars burned faintly in the belt of Orion. Not the brightest in the sky, not the most symmetrical, but unmistakable in their alignment, one slightly off from the others, leaning like a shoulder drawn back before motion. And below them, the pyramids, 3 of them, aligned not just with each other, but with the sky, not just a general resemblance, an exact match, in size, in spacing, in position. It is not legend, it is not interpretation. Satellite imaging and astronomical modeling confirm it. The pyramids of Giza mirror Orion's belt. The match becomes perfect, not in the present, but in the sky of 10,500 BCE. A time when, by mainstream history, no civilization capable of such a feat had yet existed. But the stones remain. They tell no story in words. They do not explain themselves. They simply point upward, quietly, as they have for thousands of years, as though waiting for someone, anyone, to notice. And they do not just point at stars. They whisper directions. The Great Pyramid aligns almost perfectly with true north, deviating by a margin smaller than most modern city blocks. No compass, no satellites, just stone and intention. Other ancient structures have astronomical alignments. Stonehenge and its solstices. The temples of Angkor and their relation to the Milky Way. But Giza is different. Its scale is unmatched. Its silence is deeper. And its alignment is not symbolic. It is mechanical, geometric, unerring. Some say the pyramids were calendars, that their layout marked seasons or floods. Others believe they encoded a cosmic message, a signal to those above, or a map to those yet to come. Still others whisper that the builders did not observe the stars, but remembered them. Remembered them not from stories, but from flight. These are the stories not printed in textbooks. They pass in quiet circles, among researchers uninvited to conferences, among skywatchers who notice patterns too precise for myth. The idea that Orion was not just a constellation, but a memory, a place once seen, not imagined. Even the ancient Egyptians, in their preserved texts, regarded Orion not as a figure of fantasy, but a destination. They believed their god Osiris came from there, that his soul returned to the belt each night, walking the river of stars. Was this belief born from metaphor, or from something older? Some hieroglyphs suggest that the soul of the pharaoh ascended not to heaven, but to Orion. Not for eternity, but for reunion. But the Great Pyramid holds no such texts, no hymns, no prayers. It only points. It points north with impossible precision. It mirrors Orion with silent grace. And it speaks only when the wind dies and the stars begin to turn again. When no one is listening, except the stones. There are maps, old and incomplete, that connect the pyramids to other star patterns across the world. A line from Giza to Teotihuacan, from Teotihuacan to Angkor Wat. Each site, each monument shares something intangible, a symmetry not only on Earth, but with the sky. If drawn out, they form a web, a forgotten geometry, too large for the eye, too quiet for the tongue. Modern science calls it pareidolia, the tendency to see patterns where none exist. But what if the pattern is real, and we are simply too young to remember why? There is no inscription to explain it. No chamber filled with diagrams. Only the stones, only the silence, and the stars that drift above them, same as always. Watching, remembering. And if the stars remember, then perhaps so do the stones. Perhaps they were never built to be looked at. Perhaps they were built to look back. Maps are drawn with intention. Every border, every name, every shaded terrain speaks not only of geography, but of meaning. And yet, for all our cartography, for all our lines across land and sea, there is one place that does not bear the title center, and yet holds that role without argument. The Giza Plateau does not rest in the middle of Egypt. It does not command the coastline. It is not cradled by river or shielded by mountains. It stands alone at the edge of the desert, under a sky that offers no compass. And yet, if you were to trace the longest line of latitude across the earth and pair it with the longest line of longitude, their meeting point, by quiet precision, falls near Giza. It is not the mathematical center of every continent. It is not the geographical balance of oceans. But somehow, when all land masses are considered, when weight and stretch are averaged, the pyramids stand where the earth itself seems to exhale. No sign proclaims it. No monument claims it. But there it is, intersection, not marked by human design, yet obeyed by the planet's own geometry. This fact, long obscured by academic caution, emerged from geodesic models, from satellite alignment, from algorithms designed not for mystery, but for measurement. The data, indifferent to story or symbol, revealed it anyway. The Great Pyramid, immovable, wordless, patient, rests where the world balances itself. And yet, the question remains, was it placed there because it was center, or did it become center because it was placed? Ancient texts do not tell. No scroll whispers why that patch of earth was chosen. The Nile does not bend in homage to it. The trade winds do not circle it. It is simply there, like the pivot of a wheel you didn't know you were turning. Some believe it was coincidence, others, inevitability. But among those who listen more than speak, who read not with eyes but with presence, there is another thought, that Giza was not chosen for its position on Earth, but for its resonance with something beyond it, that it aligns not just with coordinates, but with frequency. The Earth hums, not in ways most can hear, but it hums, deep and low, a vibration that echoes through bedrock and ocean floor. Some places amplify it, others silence it, and in a few rare points, the hum seems to rise, clearer, stronger. Giza is one such place. Instruments buried in the sand have recorded anomalies, resonance too precise for geology, tones that do not fade, as though something beneath the stones is responding or remembering. If you stand between the three pyramids at dawn, in the cold breath before light, the silence is dense. It thickens the air. Even the birds seem to hesitate. And in that pause, if you hold still enough, there is a sensation, not of being watched, but of being noticed, not judged, not welcomed, simply registered, as though something timeless is aware of your presence. And yet, nothing moves. The pyramids do not change. The sand does not shift. The wind carries no message. But the feeling lingers, clinging like the cool edge of stone touched before sunrise. Across centuries, builders and seekers returned to this spot. They came from Rome, from Baghdad, from London. They mapped, they measured, they imagined, but none could explain why the pyramids stand where they do. Why, without visible logic, they embody the intersection of heaven and earth. There is no marker, no flag, no plaque to commemorate its placement. But perhaps that is the point. True centers do not announce themselves. They wait. And beneath that stillness, something old, older than maps, older than names, holds its breath, as if remembering the moment when the first stone met the heart of the world. The entrance is narrow, carved not for grandeur, but for direction. There are no gates, no arches, no inscriptions, only a passage, low, sloping downward, as though the pyramid were not meant to be entered, but endured. The limestone walls press inward, rough in places, sweating the cool breath of ancient stone. And then, deeper still, the path levels, and silence begins. Not ordinary silence, not the absence of noise, but something else. A fullness, as though the air itself has weight, as though it remembers something that once moved within it and now waits, hollow and unresolved. There are no torches, no sconces. Light does not belong here. What the pyramid offers instead is darkness layered upon itself, alive, unblinking, thick enough to rest against the skin. And there are no words. Unlike the tombs of kings and queens throughout Egypt, covered in spells, adorned with gods, painted in celebration, the interior of the Great Pyramid offers no story, no murals, no names, no instructions for the soul's journey. Just stone, polished in places, rough in others, and always, always it leads further in. Some believed this was a mistake, that the walls were once painted, once inscribed, and time had erased them. But stone does not forget easily. Elsewhere, pigment survives after 5,000 years. Elsewhere, the gods still shine in ochre and blue. But not here. Here, there is nothing to say. The king's chamber sits near the heart of the pyramid. It is not centered in height, nor in geometry, but in sensation. Step into it, and the silence changes. It presses differently. The granite blocks that form its walls and ceiling are not local. They came from far away, red, hard, heavy, and they ring softly when struck. Not with echo, but with resonance, as if the room itself once sang. In the center of that chamber lies a box, empty, chipped at the edges, made of the same stone. No lid, no decoration. It resembles a sarcophagus, but there is no evidence it ever held a body, no residue, no marking, only volume, a shape carved not to contain, but to frame. There are stories softly passed between those who linger too long, that certain frequencies, when played within the chamber, awaken the stone, that the walls begin to hum, low and steady, that standing within that box, at just the right pitch, the body feels less heavy, as though gravity forgets itself, as though the pyramid remembers something older than mass. Outside the chamber, shafts lead upward, not to the surface, but to the stars. Not directly, but precisely. Their angles align with constellations only visible from the skies of 10,000 years ago. Orion, Sirius, Thuban. Not spiritual names, but coordinates. As if something once rose from within the pyramid, passing through those shafts, returning to where it came from. Not a soul. Not a king. A signal. And yet, no one agrees what the pyramid was for. If it was a tomb, it is unlike any other. If it was a monument, it is mute. If it was a temple, it does not worship. And if it was none of these, then why was it made at all? The silence does not answer. But it does not release you either. Once inside, the weight of it clings to the body. Visitors report feeling watched, not seen, not judged, just recorded. Like a note added to a ledger written not in ink, but in thought. Outside, the pyramid casts long shadows, ancient and patient. But inside, the darkness does not move. It waits, it holds, and it remembers. Some researchers, driven by logic, dismiss the silence as coincidence, a byproduct of architecture, a blank space, misunderstood, but others, those who return with nothing in their hands but something changed in their breath, they speak differently. They say the pyramid listens, that it hears the footsteps of every visitor. that it does not speak, because it is still deciding what to say. And in the silence between its stones, the echo of something not yet known, something too old to be remembered, too present to be forgotten, stretches just beyond hearing, like a word forming slowly in the dark. There is no water here. The sand stretches in every direction, parched and defiant, scorched by a sun that does not blink. The air shimmers. The dunes rise and fall like ancient breath. And yet, beneath it all, beneath the weight of time and stone, lies a whisper of something that should not be. Seashells, tiny, bleached, and brittle, embedded in stone, crushed into the dust, hidden in sediment so old it no longer remembers the sea it once kissed. They are not decorations. They are not offerings. They are remains, fossilized shells, spiral fragments, silent witnesses, found not just in the soil beyond the pyramid, but beneath it, trapped beneath the foundation of something that was never supposed to know the ocean. Scientists discovered them by accident, scraping a trench, analyzing soil composition, trying to date the layers of sediment. At first, they thought it was contamination, modern debris, but the shells were old, not just centuries, not just millennia. Some dated back more than 10,000 years, some even older. They were packed in thick layers, stratified beds of limestone over 4 meters deep, and in those layers, alongside the shells, lay the dust of coral, traces of marine creatures long extinct, and the memory of salt where no wave had broken for tens of thousands of years. If the pyramid was built after the floodplains dried, if Giza had always been desert, then what were ocean fossils doing so far inland, so far beneath? Some tried to explain it as ancient rivers, dried seas, geological migration, but none of those models account for the preservation, for the clarity of shell structure, for the precise depth, for their position beneath the deepest stones of the pyramid's base. The conclusion, whispered more than printed, was this: the site where the Great Pyramid now stands was once underwater, not briefly, not accidentally, but as part of a vast, forgotten coastline. And if the pyramid rests atop that memory, then it was placed after the sea receded, but before the desert swallowed it. That narrows the window, not to the reign of a pharaoh, not to a dynasty, but to an epoch. A time so far back it no longer has names, only layers. A time before the Sahara was sand, before Egypt was a word, and so the idea begins to form, soft and uncertain, that the pyramid may have stood here not for thousands, but for tens of thousands of years, that its builders did not carve through desert, but through soft, wet earth, that they came before memory and left behind not writing, not stories, but alignment, mass, geometry, and a silence that could endure the tide. In the corridors of certain museums, behind glass and beneath footnotes, fragments of these shells are kept. Unlabeled, untouched, most visitors walk past them unaware. They do not look like keys, but they are. They are pieces of a map, no longer drawn in ink, but in contradiction. Evidence not of how something was made, but of when. And still, the pyramid does not change. It does not rise to confirm or deny. It only remains. Above shells, above coral, above time. Some believe it was not built at all, but uncovered. That what we now call the Great Pyramid was never buried, but revealed slowly carried upward by receding waters, like a memory rising from a dream. And others, more quietly, ask the question no one wants to hear. If something was here before the sea and remained after it, then what else waited with it beneath the waves? Not all stones are shaped by human hands. Some, it seems, shape themselves into meaning, into message, into monument. The shells beneath the Great Pyramid do not tell a story in words. They offer no legend, no origin myth. But they exist, and that is enough. Enough to unwrite a timeline. Enough to unearth a silence deeper than sand. And beneath that silence, beneath the sea that left no name, a single spiral shell rests in stone, its hollow center still facing upward, as if listening for the tide that may one day return. There are places in the world where footsteps linger long after the traveler has vanished. Imprints in stone, pressed not into mud or dust, but into layers of time so old they no longer belong to history. These are not tracks one can follow. They do not lead anywhere. They appear once, alone, often without context, as if someone walked briefly through the world and then was gone. Near the base of ancient cliffs in the western deserts, where nothing grows and nothing is buried, a single human footprint was found. It was not carved, not forged. It was fossilized, pressed into limestone dated to over 100 million years ago. The stone contained no modern sediment, no erosion marks. It had once been seabed, long before the Nile, long before sand, long before mammals. And yet, there it was. 5 toes, an arch, a heel, proportioned not like a primitive ancestor, but like a modern foot, upright, human. Nearby, within the same strata, lay the remains of trilobites, extinct creatures last seen in oceans hundreds of millions of years before any man was supposed to walk. One of them, shattered and curled, appeared crushed beneath the heel. Not beside it, beneath it. Scientists argued. They dismissed it as anomaly, as a natural formation that resembled a footprint. They said coincidence could sculpt strange things, but those who touched it said otherwise. They said the impression was deep, clean, too defined to be chance. And they said the feeling, the sense of it, was not geological, but deliberate, like a whisper pressed into stone. It was not the only one. In South Africa, in the shadow of ancient granite, a larger footprint was found, much larger. It stood over a meter in length, pressed into vertical stone, as though the walker had stepped sideways into a wall. The rock had hardened over 3 billion years ago. The indentation was clean, sharp-edged, impossible, and yet there it remained. Most museums refuse to display such things. They offer no framework. They cannot be placed on timelines or charts. No foot should exist within stone that predates vertebrates. No human form should crush an animal extinct before flowers existed. And yet, these shapes are there. And if they are real, then who made them? The builders of the Great Pyramid, if they existed before the sea, before the desert, before the pharaohs, would have left behind no bones, no cities, no spoken language. But perhaps they left only one thing: weight. Not in words, not in tools, but in stone. the weight of presence, of passing. It is not just the size of the footprints that defies logic. It is their loneliness. No trail, no other step, just one as if the walker stepped briefly into our world, like a note struck once and left to echo. Some believe they are messages, not for us, but for the earth itself. A marking, a calibration, a signature not of ownership, but of memory. And in that slip, something leaves a mark. What does it mean when the stones beneath a pyramid contain the remnants of a sea? And the sea contains the shape of a foot, and the foot resembles ours, but not entirely? What does it mean when the records of Earth speak a language no civilization remembers? We walk atop a planet layered with memory, most of it unread, most of it beyond translation, but some of it carved, accidentally or not, into the foundation it tough, like a whisper pressed into clay before it dried, a trace not of who we are, but of who else has passed this way. At the base of the Great Pyramid, the stones hold no names, but perhaps that is because names are too young, too temporary. Perhaps the builders knew that language fades, but pressure remains. Perhaps they knew that to be remembered, one need only step where time is watching. And so the footprint waits, half lost beneath the sand, half remembered in stone, its silence louder than any story ever spoken, its shape still too large to wear. It is not marked. There is no handle, no seams, just a wall, flat, cold, smooth as breathless granite, tucked in the deepest bend of an old temple corridor, not far from the Great Pyramid, yet never named alongside it. The tourists pass it without pause. The guides do not mention it. Even the blueprints, drawn and redrawn through decades of archaeological measurement, leave it as a blank space. But it is there, unmoving, watching. For years, it was mistaken for an ordinary wall. Its color the same as the stone around it, its texture indistinguishable. But one night, under the narrow beam of a surveyor's laser, something shimmered. A change in depth so slight it could not be felt by hand. A shape began to emerge. A rectangle, perfectly proportioned, framed not by chiseling, but by shadow. A doorway without a door. They tried to measure it. The instruments detected resonance, faint but persistent. A hollowness behind it, 2 meters deep, then 3. Not a cavity, a chamber. But there was no sound, no draft, no variance in temperature. The air on both sides of the stone remained the same, still, unmoved, as if the chamber beyond the wall did not exist in this world's rhythm. The stone was tested, composed of the same granite as the rest of the temple, but denser, older, almost as if it had aged differently, touched not by time, but by intention. Some proposed drilling just a small hole, a fiber optic camera, but every attempt failed. Tools broke, blades dulled. Even thermal cutting left no mark. The stone refused, not with violence, not with protest. It simply did not allow itself to be opened. One researcher, young, quiet, persistent, sat beside it for 3 nights. He brought no equipment, just a notebook. On the 4th morning, he returned pale, silent, and left his work unfinished. No one knows what he heard, but his notes, cryptic and incomplete, contained only one sentence repeated over and over. It is not locked, it is closed. What is a door that cannot be opened? A threshold? A warning? Or merely a boundary between one silence and another? Some whispered that the chamber behind it is not empty, that it holds something not meant to be found, not cursed, not dangerous, simply incompatible. A memory too old for minds to hold, a design not meant for breath. Others say the door does open, but only under conditions no longer possible. A sound no one can produce, a vibration long forgotten, a hand no longer born. And then there are the stories, passed down quietly through desert families, never written. Tales of a night when the moon disappeared and the air grew thick, and a sound came from inside the mountain. Not a scream, not a roar, just a slow, wet knock, as if stone had shifted against stone from the inside. The next morning, a boy was missing, and the villagers never walked near that temple again. None of this is documented, none of it verified, but the wall remains, untouched, undisturbed, and the corridor that leads to it is always colder than the rest of the structure, even under the desert sun. The Great Pyramid itself has its own closed doors, sealed shafts, hidden passages, but this one, this door, it does not exist within its walls. It exists beside it, like a footnote to a secret, or the answer to a question never asked. Perhaps it was never meant to be opened. Perhaps it already has. Or perhaps, like the rest of the structure, it is waiting for something other than force, for something slower, softer, a presence maybe, a memory perhaps, a moment where the right soul stands before it and the stone remembers what it was built for. Until then, it remains what it is, flat, still, quiet, and behind it, just beyond the thickness of forgotten granite, a space holds its shape against the world, untouched by air, unseen by light, waiting not to be found, but to be understood. It was found where no inscription should be, not on a wall, not on a stele, but on the underside of a single stone slab, buried beneath layers of sand, resting in the base of a structure adjacent to the Great Pyramid. A block not meant to be moved, its surface unremarkable, its presence forgotten until it cracked. Not by force, not by weather, but by time's slow, quiet insistence. And beneath it, carved into the smooth granite, was writing. Not hieroglyphs, not Coptic, not Sumerian, no script known to any library. The lines were clean, elegant, curved in places, angular in others. Some spiraled inward, others ended abruptly as if refusing to finish. And there were no repeating characters, no rhythm to decode. It was a message, that much was clear, but not one shaped for human reading. The archaeologists photographed it, traced it, fed it into translation programs and linguistic algorithms. Nothing responded. The symbols matched no phonetics, no pictorial system. It was not decorative. It had grammar, but no root. The slab was removed, studied, stored. But within days, those who handled it reported strange sensations, not illness, not fear, just a presence. One described it as standing near a tide that never touched the shore. Another said it felt like a voice just behind the ear, but saying nothing. And when asked what the symbols meant, none could answer. But they all agreed. It was not a warning, not a command. It felt observational, like the words were watching, not speaking, not left for us, but left about us. Later, one fragment of the script appeared in another place, half a world away, carved into the edge of a monolith in South America, also buried until erosion laid it bare. The same curve, the same flick of stone at the end of a line, dated to a time when no contact was possible, and yet undeniably linked. A third piece emerged from the floor of a flooded cave in Indonesia, not carved, but burned into basalt. Its lines shimmered beneath water, untouched by coral or moss, as if time refused to settle over them. These symbols, scattered and disconnected by continents, seemed to form the edges of something larger. Not a sentence, not a paragraph, but a presence. As if the earth itself had been marked, not for communication, but for memory. And always, when the marks were uncovered, something changed in the air. A weight, a stillness. Instruments would fail. Batteries drain, cameras distort. The symbols did not resist being seen, but they did not welcome it either. They existed the way shadows do, naturally, but not entirely understood. Some believed they were the remnants of a language that predates language, a structure of meaning not built on sound, but on perception. Not heard, not spoken, only known. Others believed they were code, not for humans, but for systems now gone. A way to trigger, to align, to awaken. Not myth, not magic. Just a key waiting for a lock that may never return. And in the Great Pyramid itself, where so few carvings exist, a single matching curve was found, half buried in a ceiling joint too high for ordinary sight. Only visible when a mirror was angled just right. It was faint, dust-worn, but it was there. Not painted, not scratched, etched with precision. It was as if the builders had left breadcrumbs, not for us, but for themselves, or for something that would come after. What does it mean to find a message written in a script no one can read, in places no one was supposed to reach? What does it say about the silence of the pyramids, that the only word they carry is one no voice can pronounce? Perhaps the language was not meant to be understood. Perhaps it was meant to remind, to hold a shape, to echo. Because even now, when that curve appears, drawn by hand or found in stone, those who see it pause. They cannot say why, only that it feels familiar, like a memory not yet lived. And somewhere beneath that feeling, deeper than thought, beyond the noise of names, the language waits. Not to be read, but to be remembered. The wind returns slowly, as it always does, not with force, not to erase, but to remind. It carries the smell of stone warmed by endless sun, and dust so fine it clings to memory more than skin. Over the plateau of Giza, The light shifts again, low and gold, the hour when shadows begin to stretch thin, as if searching for something long lost. The pyramids do not change. They do not speak, but they receive. Day after day, night after night. Light falls across their angled faces and slips down into their stillness, where no voice stirs. And still, something listens. From a distance, they remain geometric, measured, solid, silent. But up close, there are scars, small chips in the stone. Erosion not from rain, but from time's peculiar unraveling. Along one edge of the Great Pyramid, a seam runs just slightly out of place, as though the stone shifted once, just once, beneath pressure not seen or heard. Some say it happened during an earthquake. Others, that it marks the moment something beneath the pyramid moved. But no records tell of a quake. No instrument detected a tremor. Just a line. A long, quiet scar. Like a breath once held and released. And beneath that same edge, covered by centuries of dust, lies a single carving. Not a symbol, not a figure, just a line, curved, faint, worn, nearly invisible. But there, the same arc found beneath the slab, the same as on the far continent, as in the cave. Its edges are not deep, but they hold. Someone once stood here, long before scripts and nations, and chose to leave not their name, but their question. Was it ever meant to be answered? Around the pyramids, more than the stones have aged. The stories have, too. The curses, the legends, the speculation, layered so thickly that the true weight of the place is often buried beneath them. But sometimes, in a moment of stillness, when no one is looking and no one is explaining, the place becomes quiet enough to remember itself. And when it does, the feeling returns. It is not fear. It is not awe. It is older than both. It is the sensation of being noticed by something that has already forgotten the names of stars. Something that does not need you to understand, but only to feel. The recognition of presence, not as witness, but as echo. For centuries, men have tried to unlock the pyramids, to peer inside, to extract meaning, to map every corridor and measure every angle. But the pyramid was never meant to be solved. It was never a puzzle. It was a whisper, and whispers do not answer. They linger. There is no end to this story. No key, no twist, only layers. Some visible, some buried, some still forming. And perhaps that is enough. To know that somewhere, beneath the dunes, beneath the echoes of wind and the weight of stone, something waits, not trapped, not hidden, but resting. A thought pressed into the earth before words were born. A memory that no longer seeks its name. Tonight, as the stars begin to emerge one by one, Orion rising, silent over the horizon, the shape of the pyramid becomes something softer. Not architecture, not monument, but silhouette, against sky, against silence. And just before the wind falls still again, something flickers at the edge of hearing. Not a voice, not a sound, just the feeling that something is watching back. Somewhere beneath the dunes, a whisper still waits. It was not a map, not at first glance, It had no compass rose, no legend, no names, just a piece of vellum, dry but uncracked, wrapped around a thin wooden rod darkened with age. It was found in a box that bore no markings, among fragments of scrolls, stones, and dust so fine it moved with breath. The box had been locked but not sealed, as if no one was meant to open it, and yet someone had always known that one day it would be. When unrolled, the surface revealed nothing but time. Lines faded into shadow, shapes bled into emptiness, but slowly, faintly, like ink coaxed by warmth, a pattern began to form. Curves that became contours, dots that became valleys, a spiral etched with 6 smaller points surrounding it, positioned not randomly, but with intention. No place matched what it showed. No coastline, no elevation, no known topography. The lines were too precise to be decoration, but too strange to belong to Earth. And at the very edge, nearly lost in the curl of the parchment, a single phrase appeared, inked in a script no tongue could pronounce. Not where it is, where it waits. That phrase had appeared before, beneath the slab, in the curve, on the ceiling joint, in the tremble of symbols found underwater and across hemispheres. And now here, in this final artifact, it stood alone. No context, no instruction, just that. Was it a warning, a guide, a lament? Some believed the map was not of a place, but of a memory, not of geography, but of alignment. That the lines did not show what could be walked, but what could be felt. And that if followed, not by foot, but by perception, they would lead not to a destination, but to a doorway long closed. Others thought the map was a mirror, not of this world, but of another. The shadow of Earth laid against another frequency. A layout of the forgotten, where pyramids still hum and footprints never vanish. But no one agreed. No one could prove. The map refused translation. When scanned, its surface turned blank. When copied, its details faded. It only appeared under specific light, under warmth, under touch, as if the ink was not drawn, but remembered. The scholar who first held it noted something else, that when his hand hovered over the central spiral, his breath caught in his throat, not out of fear, but recognition. He did not know what it was. He had never seen it before. And yet, he had. Like the way a name almost returns in a dream. Close, close, then gone. And perhaps that was the point. Not to reveal, not to explain, but to remind, to leave a shape that would reappear only when the world was quiet enough to feel it. A shape not of place, but of waiting. Because the Great Pyramid, the shells beneath it, the silence inside it, the door that never opened, the symbols never spoken, all of them had been parts of a map not drawn with ink, but with intention. Not to be followed in sequence, but remembered in fragments. A sound here, a shadow there, a curve that should not repeat, but does. And just as the pyramids mark the stars mark something else. Not direction, not arrival, but rhythm. The earth breathes in centuries. The sky speaks in millennia. And somewhere in that long, slow exhale, we glimpse these fragments, not to own, not to solve, but to join, briefly, like a single footstep in ancient stone. A whisper not heard, but held. And so the story does not end. It returns, like sand returning to the same corner of a dune, like light falling the same way across the same stone at the same time each year. Nothing moves, and everything does. Tonight, as the final light slips behind the edge of the desert, and the winds grow still once more, the Great Pyramid sits as it always has, beneath stars that once had names we've forgotten, above seas that once knew life we never met. And in that stillness, one cannot help but feel something is waiting, not for discovery, not for belief, but for someone to simply remember. Somewhere beneath the dunes, a whisper still waits.